I'm Reverend Michelle Buhite, the minister of this congregation. We are so glad you have chosen to join us in worship. As we gather, we acknowledge that our church is built on occupied land that once belonged to the First Nations people of this region, the Haudenosaunee. Today, I am pleased to turn over our virtual pulpit to my friend and colleague, the Reverend Joe Cherry. Reverend Joe and I met in seminary at Meadville Lombard Theological School in Chicago and have been friends ever since. Reverend Joe lives in Greater Cleveland with his husband, the Reverend Denis Paul, and their cute little dog with a big spirit, Toulouse. He is currently serving as the parish minister to the Unitarian Universalist congregation of Cleveland. Reverend Joe's topic is co-creating the world we dream of. He asks, what do a theoretical mathematician, an Afrofuturist, and wool have in common? He will attempt to bring these seemingly unrelated ideas together. It's not quite a death-defying high-wire act, but he hopes you'll enjoy the theological and practical applications of a school of philosophy and theology that was first articulated almost 100 years ago. We begin our worship together by lighting the Flaming Chalice, the symbol of Unitarian Universalism that embodies the light of reason and the search for truth and meaning, the warmth of friendship and community, and the fire of our commitment to bring more justice and compassion to a hurting world. If you have a chalice or simple candle at home, please prepare to light it as we light our shared chalice.
Our words for the chalice lighting today come from Octavia Butler, Parable of the Sower. God is power, infinite, irresistible, inexorable, indifferent, and yet God is pliable, trickster, teacher, chaos, clay. God exists to be shaped. God is change. We light our chalice today in the knowledge that the future lies unwritten.
Good morning, everyone. My name is Angela Warren, and I'm the Director of Faith Development for UU Amherst. Our Time for All Ages today is a story of imagination, collaboration, and creativity. Has anyone ever said to you, do you think you could use this for something? Have you ever held on to objects thinking, someday I'm going to do something with this, these, those, or that? Well, I know I have. Seashells, glass jars, paper towel and toilet paper tubes, beach glass, bricks that no longer have a home, magazines that are 20 years old windows perhaps. Part of this hanging on to objects is that I just don't want to throw everything into the landfill. I want to be a responsible member of the Earth community, just as you do. Remember how we learned the difference between recycling and wish cycling from our members Devin Southall and Emma Whitney 2 winters ago? This holding on to objects, especially when they can't actually be recycled, could be seen as an extended form of wish cycling. We don't throw it away and wish for the time or the idea or both to emerge so that we can make something out of it, whatever it is. Because we know the whole is greater than the sum of its parts, but we just don't know what the whole is yet. Maria Kondo or the Swedish death cleaners would not approve, but we just can't help it. Many of you are aware of, and many have participated in our all-church, all-faith development activities over the last 2 church years. There's been quite an assortment, but I have to say that the activity we engaged in yesterday had the most interesting origin of all. It began with the FD team and I considering what to put into the activity baskets that would be delivered the week before Easter Sunday this year. Should we just keep it simple and color eggs? Should we share farm eggs from chickens with names? Paper flowers from tissue and pipe cleaners? Cookies or candies? Sprout making kits? Of course there should be an Easter treat, but not too much. Everyone gets too much candy anyway. And then I received a phone call from our dear friend Jackie Babka. Angela, I have a few dozen empty glass yogurt jars. Do you think that you could use them for faith development? And again, They weren't much by themselves except a container to collect change or paper clips and safety pins, but I started to wonder, and wondered out loud during the conversation. Could I decorate the outside of the jar by adhering some of the family sea glass collection to it? Could they be candle holders? Would they stick with hot glue and have the glue withstand the heat of the flame? We hung up, and later on that evening while watching TV, I gathered the supplies and tried it out. It worked. But then, it was just a candle holder. It needed to be more meaningful. What if we added some mismatched saucers? Another jar as a pedestal? Wow, that candle holder could morph into a chalice, the symbol of Unitarian Universalism. I called Jackie back to accept the offer, saving the jars from collecting dust or nuts and bolts and paper clips. What other elements should we add to the basket? A treat packaged by member Suzanne Christ. An egg coloring kit. Then an email came from a new friend of our church, Itzel Orduna, who told me of her super-producing backyard chickens. She asked if their eggs would be an appropriate donation to the Amherst Little Free Pantry. My reply was that generally the pantry does not accept perishable goods, but that it just so happened I could add some fresh hard-boiled eggs to each activity basket. Although belated due to unforeseen circumstances, our adventure and creativity took place yesterday on Zoom, with 15 families and individuals from this congregation participating. We morphed 2 glass cups, some mismatched saucers, and found objects from the land and the sea into objects of creativity and purpose, objects that symbolize our Unitarian Universalist faith, our sacred relationship to the earth, and to one another. Many thanks to all the participants and to those who inspired the creation. And thanks to Marlena Rice, Lorraine Marcus, and Marge Marcille for delivering the supplies to others. We are both the legacy and the future of this place called UU Amherst. Let this be the chalice of our continued creativity and imagination. We are creative, active people who tell stories and forge friendships, encourage imagination and generosity. How fortunate we are to engage with this beloved community. Let the flame of our chalice always burn brightly.
We are the ones, we are the ones, we've been waiting. We are the ones, we are the ones, we've been waiting. We are the ones, we are the ones, we've been waiting. We are the ones, we are the ones, we've been waiting. We are the ones, we are the ones, we've been waiting. We are the ones, we are the ones, we've been waiting.
We are the ones,
we are the ones, we've been waiting.
we are the ones,
We are the ones, we've been waiting.
we are the ones,
We are
This morning's reading is called Absence, a poem by Billy Collins, the former poet laureate of the United States. This morning, as low clouds skidded over the spires of the city, I found next to a bench in the park an ivory chess piece, the White Knight, as it turned out. And in the pigeon ruffling wind, I wondered where all the others were, lined up somewhere on their red and black squares, many of them feeling uneasy about the salt shaker that was taking his place, and all of them secretly longing for the moment when the white horse would reappear out of nowhere and advance toward the board with his distinctive motion, stepping forward, then sideways before advancing again. The same move I was making him do over and over in the sunny field of my palm.
If every woman in the world had her mind set on freedom, if every woman in the world dreamed a sweet dream of peace, if every woman of every nation, young and old, each generation, held her hands out in the name of love, there would be no more war.
Every man in the world had his mind set on freedom. If every brother stood with brother as a witness for peace. If every man of every nation, young and old, each generation, held his hands out in the name of love, there would be no more war.
If every leader in the world shared a vision of freedom, if every leader in the world shared a sweet dream of peace, if every leader of every nation worked for justice and liberation, holding hands out in the name of love, there would be no more war. If every nation in the world set a true course for freedom, if every nation raised its children in a culture of peace, if all our sons and all our daughters preached with friendship across the borders, refusing to be enemies, there would be no more war.
It's almost a brand new growing season, a time for new life, new plants, and new possibilities. In many ways, it often feels like a new year at this time of spring, a clean slate, a chance for new possibilities. It is new possibilities that I wish to speak with you about today, starting with a 20th century academic named Alfred North Whitehead. Whitehead was a notable mathematician, logician, educator, and philosopher. The staggering complexity of Whitehead's thought, coupled with the extraordinary literary quality of his writing, have conspired to make Whitehead, in an oft-repeated saying, one of the most quoted but least read philosophers in the Western canon. While he is widely recognized for his collaborative work with Bertrand Russell on the Principia Mathematica, he also made highly innovative contributions to philosophy, especially in the area of process metaphysics. Whitehead's decades-long focus on the logical and algebraic issues of space and geometry led to his work on extension, which is an integral part of an explosion of profoundly original philosophical work. Facing mandatory retirement at the age of 65 in England, Whitehead accepted an invitation and position from Harvard in 1924, where he continued his philosophical output. His Science in the Modern World offers a careful critique of orthodox scientific materialism and presents his first worked-out version of the related fallacies of misplaced concreteness and simple location. The first fallacy is the error of treating an abstraction as though it were really concretely real. The second is the error of assuming that anything that is real must have a simple spatial location. But the pinnacle of Whitehead's metaphysical work came with his monumental book, Process and Reality in 1929, followed by his Adventures of Ideas in 1933. The first of these books gives a comprehensive and multi-layered categorical system of internal and external relations that analyzes the logic of becoming an extension within the context of a solution to the problem of the one and the many, while also providing a ground for his philosophy of nature. The second is an outline of philosophy of history and culture within the framework of his own metaphysical scheme. Whitehead brought to us an interdisciplinary concept called process philosophy, which is often now regarded as more than just a philosophy, but also a theology. Process theology is very dense and complicated, so much so that outside of the academy, it is hardly discussed, because to do so takes years of contextual study. Part of the challenge of bringing a subject like process theology to the public, particularly as a parish minister, to a congregation, is that the ideas behind and through process theology are so large that they defy reduction into a 15 to 20-minute sermon. I tell you this because I am no more amazing than anyone else, and I'm going to try to express some of the core ideas of process theology today, and I will not do a complete job of it. How many of you have seen the movie called Hidden Figures? It came out about 4 years ago. Whether or not you've seen it, there's a scene where Dr. Catherine Goebel Johnson is doing some calculations on this large blackboard. And I'm sure that there, to many who are not me, some of what she was doing made sense. I recognized some of the symbols. I understood about balancing equations. But after that, well, it was all a mystery to me. For the movie to explain all that math to me, sitting as I was in the audience in the theater, would have made the movie hours longer than it needed to be or should be. So here's what they did. They let her write all over that chalkboard. And then when she found the answer, she circled it. And that let the non-math people, like me, know that it was all good, that she'd figured it all out. I didn't have to worry anymore. And I was grateful. That circling is a partial summation of all of the many years of training and her own natural genius, laid out simply for me. It was a snapshot of the process. What I'm bringing you is a snapshot this morning of process theology. If you want to know more about it, and a few of you well might, I'm very happy to direct you to the things that can be read by you, but nobody on a Sunday morning deserves to be dragged through some of what seminarians had to read. One small example, the 28-page essay that comes with a 48-page glossary of terms to explain the 28-page essay. Whitehead believed that God is mutable, movable, a force of creation, yes, but not the sole force of creation. He believed in the human will and the actions that will expresses as a co-creative force with God, as a pair working together to create the universe. I chose this image for a couple reasons. I couldn't find any really cool image of knitting needles mid-stitch. I couldn't find an image of a racially diverse group of people knitting together, and I was unwilling to share an image of a pretty white girl knitting because that image would have been counter to the kind of world I'm trying to co-create with the divine. Would have been expected, and this faith is often about the unexpected. I chose knitting needles because, to me, it can be a symbol of process theology. Whatever your definition of the power that is larger than you in the universe, maybe God, maybe nature, maybe the collective force of humanity, the flying spaghetti monster, whatever that images or definition are, for this morning, please visualize them as a knitting needle. Have you done that? Okay, good. Now you are the other needle that is required to make even the simplest of stitches. This is how it works. There is knitting needle A, and there is knitting needle B. God and you, and the two needles must interact in a dance that to some seems ordinary, and to others, like me, seems frankly magical, in order to create a stitch. In this allegory, time is the yarn. The two needles dance with the yarn, and a stitch happens. Life is then a series of stitches. The process theologian will tell you that each stitch is a moment in time, and that once a moment in time is past, it is forever in the past. It is forever what you and God made of it, and once it is in the past, it is immutable. But they will also tell you not to despair, because the only thing that limits the possibilities of that very moment you and God are busily co-creating, the only thing that limits the possibilities of this moment is how wide your life experience has been leading up to this moment. Imagine with me an hourglass. You see how the middle of this is just really narrow, a small passageway where a few grains of sand slips through? How the top and the bottom of the hourglass are far wider than the center where the sand falls through? In process theology, unbound by the mathematics of how many grains of sand fall in an hour, the wider your life experience, the more potential each moment in your past has as you co-create it with God. Once created, unlike knitting, that moment cannot be unstitched, at least not with current technology. I want to go back to the image of the guys knitting together again. Here is how my process worked. In the story, the internet is God. I went to worship at the temple of God, my laptop, and to ask for an image that I could use to tease, really, you all about this morning's sermon on process theology. I opened up mighty Google and did an image for knitting needles. I was hoping, as I stated earlier, to find an image of people of color knitting together, and what I found was a bunch of images of needles, utterly void of human hands or scarf that was in the process of being knitted. So I went back to Google and I adjusted my search. Knitting. I got a lot of fashion photos of people wearing knitted items. It wasn't really what I was looking for. Then I decided to get direct with Google. Multicultural hands knitting. Eventually, I found this image of the knitting dudes. This is one example of how process theology works. In my experience of life, the tools I brought with me into the moment of inquiry, my moment of searching for the known universe, my knowledge that I wanted to find an image That would be remarkable. That would be beautiful. That would give a visual indication of the kind of world I wanted to see. I wanted an image that would demonstrate quietly and yet strongly that we are a church that welcomes people of color. I wanted a more sophisticated message, a more subtle way of saying, hey, we see and value all people here than just some sign. I also wanted an image of knitting because I was already thinking about God as knitting needle, not just because it's kind of funny, but also because I think it's a good, solid image that might stick with people. Imagery, of course, is a very useful tool for teaching. So I sat in my office and I prayed, or I Googled. Use the verb you're more comfortable with. I put my fingers to the keyboard and I requested some benevolence. I was knitting needle B and I approached knitting needle A and we engaged in a dance. I wasn't expecting an image of 4 dudes knitting together in what at first glance I took to be a Navy ship because of the color of the walls. The walls, if you couldn't tell in the picture, are a very pale gray. But then I noticed the hand tattoo on the one guy and the goatee on another, and I realized this couldn't be a Navy ship, though all the guys were young enough to be in the Navy together. This was a photo from inside an institution. The photo was from Pinterest, and at the risk of offending some, Pinterest is a site I don't really like. I can never find the context behind the images, only the images there, and so I have no way of knowing the story of the 4 young men knitting together in an institutional setting. See, I'd gone looking for one thing, and I'd found something completely different, a different story that I hadn't expected. I discovered a story about how a retired car salesperson named Lynn Swirling took her love of knitting into a prison in Maryland and has taught more than 100 men to knit. Knitting has had a real effect on the men in the institution itself. The men have learned how to knit what are called comfort dolls, which are given to children who are removed from their homes due to domestic issues there. And they also knit hats and mittens for children in inner city schools. I had gone to the divine. I'd asked to engage in a dance, and the resulting story was completely unexpected. This is the best way that I can describe process theology to you. In part because of time constraints, in part because frankly process theology can be so complex that I don't understand all of its nuances. Earlier, you heard a poem from Billy Collins called Absence. In the poem, Billy paints for us a world in which he finds a single chess piece, and he imagines 3 worlds from this random finding. He imagines a world in which he finds the chess piece. He imagines that the owners of the chess set have improvised a way to keep playing chess without the white knight by using a salt shaker. And he imagines that all the other chess pieces are made nervous by this, and they long for the return of their original family member. He imagines that the white knight in his hand longs to be made useful again. Billy Collins could have easily walked by that chess piece without noticing it, or he could have noticed it but not noted it. He may have even picked it up and committed the greatest sin possible. He could have not wondered about it at all. Instead, Mr. Collins took the sum of his wide life experiences and engaged with the chess piece and the great mystery of life, and he wondered at the possibilities. Mr. Collins, the chess piece, and the divine engage in a dance, and that poem is its result of the dance. The poem is the moment of potential, completed and now forever fixed. In our lives, we have countless moments, literally countless. Each of them is bursting with potential. And yet, as Hina Hashimi teaches us, an individual can't do anything itself. All of our dreams come true with the cooperation and co-creation of other souls. It is in the interaction with the other souls that all beautiful things come to fruition. This interaction need not be born of supplication. That is not required of us, as it is in some other faiths. Each interaction ought to be sought with humility, because the boastful don't learn. The boastful believe that they are alone are enough, that they have all the answers they need. The boastful are as one knitting needle alone, pointed but missing the point. As we leave our time together, I hope that you can keep the image of the knitting needles working together in cooperation in your mind as you go about your week, knowing that all of our dreams come true with the cooperation and co-creation of other souls, if they're ever going to come true at all. Amen. Blessed be. Ashe. Be well.
we close this time of worship as we extinguish our chalice with these familiar words. We extinguish this flame, but not the light of truth, the warmth of community, or the fire of commitment. These we carry in our hearts until we are together again. Reverend Frederick E. Gillis provides this benediction to bless the time we have shared together. May the love which overcomes all differences, which heals all wounds, which puts to flight all fears, which reconciles all who are separated, be in us and among us, now and always. Thank you for joining us in worship today. Please see the credits at the end of this service for information about the music and other worship elements. And do take a moment to visit our website, uuamherst.org, and click on the giving link, or text your gift to 833-987-1968. Your generosity in online giving is the virtual equivalent of passing the offering plate. Thank you in advance for your generosity.